we're on. Hi, everybody. I'm Eve Levy. Welcome back for another installment of our Inspired Jewish Woman weekly podcast. And today I have a dear friend, Jordana Brown. Hey, Jordana, how you doing?
Hi, Eve. Hi, everybody else.
It's so good to see you. You look great.
Oh, thank you so much. You always look perfect. So
it's been a while, right? I miss you. The best part of my job of going to Israel every year, twice a year, is that I get to bump into you. We've bumped into each other and met up a bunch of times.
Yes.
That's
it's so funny because you say bump into you and I say stalk you around the country and find you so that I can see you.
It's just like hashgacha pratit, you know?
I don't know, like, where are you? I will be there in 5 minutes. Don't go anywhere.
That's awesome. Well, I so appreciate it because Jordana and I go way back, I would say from our seminary years. Is that?
But not our seminary years. We worked at the same seminary.
It's a little bit of a blur. I have so many.
We worked in the Or HaTorah together.
That's right. Okay. So that was chapter 2 of my Israel experience, not our own seminary years, but when we were involved in seminary.
Right.
So
exactly.
So interesting. I feel like I know you from way before that, but it's probably just like this soul connection.
I think so.
Let me introduce Jordana, because Jordana is a light in the Jewish world. She is an inspiration to so many. She is out there. I tell you, Jordana, you are living my dream. Okay, so I'm a little jealous, but I'm going to put that aside right now. Jordana is born and bred New Yorker who made Aliyah in 2014 on her own, by the way, which takes guts. Not even easy to do with someone, but to do it on your own, I can't even imagine. We're going to hear your stories and how that was for you. In the States, Jordana was a licensed speech therapist, and she was active in her outreach community of Kirov. She staffed, more than a dozen birthright trips.
So sorry, my roommate just came in.
No problem. You can beat yourself. I'll keep going on and on about you. Just beat yourself. So Jordana was very busy in the birthright world, staffing so many trips. And eventually she realized that her future is in Israel. So since making Aliyah, she has become an advocate and a resource for people that want to make Aliyah and learn more about this process. And she helps them. She holds their hand as they take this plunge. And I think you're mostly working with young, observant professionals. Yes, no, I'm all people, right?
Yeah, mostly young, observant professionals. So also non-observant, also non-professionals, also, anyone who wants to, but that's probably my area of expertise.
That's amazing. And we're going to hear so much from you in a second. Jordana first lived in Jerusalem. She was this Jerusalemite woman, and I thought you would stay there forever, but there's always surprises with Jordana. So Jordana now lives in Tel Aviv, and she's an active part of the Tel Aviv community, which is so new to me because when I lived in Israel for 12 years, I was living in Jerusalem. I only went to Tel Aviv to do some shopping.
Or to go to the beach.
Or the beach, that's true. But more the shopping, because I was a seamstress back in those days. I don't know if you remember me.
Oh.
That was my seminary years. So I used to shop in Nahalat Binyamin. Like I would go there weeks. And so Tel Aviv definitely has a vibe of its own. And I'm just going to end with this from your bio, a little bit about Jordana. Jordana believes that there is a place for every single Jew in Israel. So Jordana, please share with us a little bit. We're going to call this conversation Yalla Aliyah. Okay, like, let's go, Aliyah. So tell us, inspire us. Let's hear what you got.
So in case anyone who's listening, can you hear me okay?
Yes. Great.
Okay, good. In case anyone who's listening doesn't know what Yalla means, it's actually Arabic and it means let's go. But it's definitely been adapted in the Hebrew and Israeli culture. So everybody says Yalla, it means let's go, or you got it, or it's just like this this like action verb that means like let's go. So we all love it. So Yalla Aliyah, yeah. So Yalla Aliyah to me means let's go. It's time to make Aliyah. So as Eve said, I lived in New York until 2014. I was born there. I was raised there, and I thought that I would die there, honestly.
And you have such a beautiful family there. So
I know, right?
Harder, right? You have sisters, and your parents are awesome.
And I have nieces and nephews, and I had a good job, and the whole thing. It's like, what was I doing? Because a lot of people, there's like this reputation that sometimes people who are making Aliyah are like running away from something. And that's like the first thing my mom said to me. She was like, what are you running away from? And I was like, oh, I'm not running away from anything. I'm doing this very, very on purpose. So I lived in New York, and I grew up in a very typical modern Orthodox home. I went to Jewish schools my whole life, Jewish camps my whole life, Jewish Pesach programs. I mean, like my whole life was in a modern Orthodox bubble. Absolutely loved it. Never had any interest in going elsewhere. And I took what I call the road more traveled. And I went to college and grad school, and I became a speech therapist. And I did what I was supposed to do.
You did like the good frum girl thing.
Exactly. Like you don't know, no little frum girl grows up and 6 years old. What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a speech therapist. It's just not a thing, but it's practical. So that's what I did. And I enjoyed it. It was never, my life's ambition, but it was fine. And then at one point, I think at some point you kind of, and then this is in the frum community, in the Orthodox community, a very common issue is that if you are single and you don't get married and you don't have children at a certain point in time, you don't feel as much a part of the community. And you have to kind of,
I think that's a topic for another podcast.
Right. I'm sorry. I don't want to bum anyone out, but
about that one.
But you explore different facets of your personality and different facets of things that make you happy that you wouldn't really pursue if you were in a marriage and had a family. It's just like a reality. Like you don't do as much traveling when you have a husband and a family. You don't do as much, you don't partake in as many hobbies. You don't go out as much. So I had this flexibility to kind of spend my time as I chose. And at a certain point, I got very interested in Jewish outreach, and I worked with the organization Aisha Torah, and I worked with partners in Torah, and I worked with, I was like what I call like madricha, you know what I mean? Like if you meet anyone right now, age 25 to 35, I was their madricha, So at one point I got involved with Birthright, which is, I feel like everybody knows, a trip for 18 to 26-year-olds to take to Israel for 10 days for free. And they can learn about the country and their heritage, and it's really wonderful. So I did that 12 times, and I was a counselor 12 times. And about the sixth time, someone said to me, why don't you live here? You're here so much. And I said, yeah, that's a good question. And then people would ask me that all the time because I would go every winter and summer break to Israel. And I just became really a second home for me. Mm-hmm. And around that same time, I would have conversations with, let's call them ultra Zionist friends. And they would be based on the Torah Jewish perspective on living in Israel. And it came to a point where I really started to believe, and I really started to integrate into my kind of ideology that Jews are meant to live in Israel. And that for whatever reason, over the past 2,000 years, we haven't been living in Israel as a nation, but that in 1948, a miracle happened and Jews were allowed to come home. And at a certain point, it became baffling to me why Jews weren't choosing to come home, specifically from America. And I'm going to say Canada, but specifically from America. And this is going to be controversial, and I apologize to anybody who gets offended, but I think that a major reason that people don't make Aliyah is like the monetary, materialistic aspect of what the comfort level, right? You know it. Yeah. Well, you can handle it because you want to make Aliyah, but a lot of people, that's not me. That's not who I am. That was me. I was materialistic. I was very interested. I was a shopping fanatic. I was interested in living a nice life. And, the thought of moving to a different country where the standard of living was very different, I don't want to say lower, but very different, was very overwhelming. For me, the big issue with moving to Israel was always leaving my family. It was never anything other than feeling like I can't be without them. And then I got to a certain point where I just thought, I can't live my entire life for other people.
Wow.
And that's what I was doing. I felt I was looking down the barrel of another year, doing the same thing over and over, living, just for winter break or living just for summer break so I could get back to Israel. And, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And I just felt like that's what I was doing in the United States. I was just doing the same thing year after year. I think about this all the time. I think like the years in my 20s, I don't know how to differentiate them. They are a blob to me. They're all the same. And they were happy and I was content and I was, fulfilled, but I cannot imagine if I had stayed there and lived the same way So at a certain point I told my mom, I remember this conversation so distinctly. I said to my mom, I think it was September. And I said, I'm going to start planning my Aliyah. And I want to do it in the summer. And I'm going to give myself this. She was very nervous about me finding someone. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to give myself another year to date in the United States. And if I find someone and he wants to live in America, I will stay in America and that's where I'll live. But if not, I need to go and live my own life. And so I moved back home that year and I lived at home and I saved money and planned my Aliyah, and I didn't find someone that year. And I was so excited and I made Aliyah and it was, to this day, as of now, the greatest decision that I've made.
Wow. That's so amazing. I have a lot to say. Can I jump in here?
Please.
It's my heart is like, as you're talking and you're like in Israel, we're like on this Zoom together and you're there. Okay. And I'm here. So there's a lot of emotions because I feel that my soul is supposed to be in Israel.
It is.
I actually remember the first time I went to Israel was for my bat mitzvah. And I remember just feeling like this is home. And then the next time I went was when I was 18 and I came there for the year and I got off the airplane and in those days, 20 something years ago, the airplane, you would get off the airplane, you would walk down the steps, literally bend down on the ground.
Onto the tarmac.
Right? You remember those
Yes,
days?
of course. I mean, that was when I was a little younger, but yeah, I remember it totally.
Kissing the ground. Like this was like the dream of my ancestors. This is
right.
My namesake died. She was a Zionist fighting in an underground kibbutz and she died. Yeah. Didn't leave her people. She actually had this like flight to freedom. Like she could have left, but she said, no, I need to be with my people. And when the Nazis stormed into the underground makeshift kibbutz, they said, who's in charge? And she stepped forward and they shot her. So my whole life, from the time I'm like 2 years old, 3 years old, I'm hearing this story and my whole like soul is like intertwined with Israel.
Yeah. And that's, by the way, a blessing because unfortunately it's not a given. It's not everyone.
Right. But the painful part, Jordana, is right now I'm not there. And I remember, and I lived there for many years and it was magical. Yes. But I remember when we left, and I'm not sure if you were around, if you were there at my goodbye party.
No.
But if you were there, you would have remembered that I was a sobbing mess. The way that I described it to my sister-in-laws was it felt like my soul was being pulled out of its socket. That's how painful it felt, like on a level it wasn't like a physical thing. It was just like, oh my goodness. But it was very quickly afterwards when we settled in Denver, Colorado, that I realized, oh my gosh, maybe Hashem wants me here. Maybe part of my mission right now is to talk about Israel and to bring women to Israel. And that became my path, right? I brought hundreds of women on trips to Israel and that gives me so much fulfillment. But something that keeps coming to my mind is it takes merit to live in Israel. Like not everyone is able to do it. You're lucky. You had a lot of flexibility in your life. It wouldn't be so easy for an older family, let's say, or someone this is where their livelihood is. Like it's not always so simple that you can say, we're doing it. We're going to live our dream, because a lot of people make Aliyah and then a couple of years later, they can't handle it. They can't keep up. The pressures, their kids, all for so many reasons, and they have to go back home.
Well, first of all, I think I've kind of changed my vernacular. So I don't ever use the phrase in going to America. I never use the phrase going home. Okay. I do think it's disrespectful to Israel. I do think Israel is everyone's home. And then, there is the concept that everyone can have two homes, which is true. But they're going back to America, and that happens all the time. I mean, I would say from the time that I made Aliyah, my cohort, I would say half of them went back to their country of origin. And that's just a reality. And I think that happens when someone comes to Israel, either just to try it, just to try it out. That's just not going to work. It's not, it's not a toaster oven. And B, they have one foot in and one foot out. You can't live in two places at one time. You can't, live your life with, perpetual FOMO about what's going on in your country of origin. You need to come with 2 feet in. But yeah, I was lucky. And I do see that there are reasons that people can't be here. Legitimate reasons. So what I like to do is I like to differentiate the concept of being pro-Israel versus being Zionist. And my goal is that everybody should have the desire to live in Israel, whether or not they pursue that, whether or not they take, they that comes to fruition, that's on them. But, it hurts me to my core when there are Jews that don't even want to live in Israel. That's something I can't understand. I can understand not living in Israel. I just can't understand that not being a goal.
Yeah.
It's hard for me. I
remember having this conversation with a friend of mine, and I had it when I was living in Israel. So it's different, like here I can understand why people are not there. But when I was there, it was harder for me to understand how come everyone's not getting on a plane? Like, guys, come on, it's amazing.
It's funny that you say that, because when I'm here, I can understand it. But when I'm in America, I'm just like, what are these people talking about? Like I have, and I feel very lucky that when I'm in America, because I do get to go to see my family. I'm pretty portable. I'm much more portable than my family is. So when I get to see them in the States, I don't have ever a desire to stay. I don't ever have the FOMO that I wish that this was my life. I never have the pull to make that my home again. Which I don't think a lot of my friends have that.
Right.
They've
you see your family, you're there with you fill yourself up, you do your Target runs.
Yes.
That's it. What else?
I get my Trader Joe's spices, and then I'm good.
I remember talking to a good friend of mine who was living in Canada at the time. I was in Israel, and I said, Rachel, don't you want to move here? And she was actually a single girl at the time. And, she was transportable. Like she was able to pick up and go. And she said to me, Eve, I don't really have the desire. When Mashiach comes, then And I was just like, I sat with that. I was like, no, like we need okay. So you get it.
I mean, I hear it all the time. It comes, and I don't want to call out any specific group of people, but it comes from a very specific religious ideology, I will say. I would say, if I asked you to describe Rachel, if I described her to you, you would say, yeah, that's her. So it's very much what your teachers in second grade in Beis Yaakov told you, that we're all going on the wings of a donkey when Mashiach comes.
On the wings of eagles.
On eagles or on a donkey. Oh, Mashiach's coming on a donkey. We're going on the wings of an eagle. Very good. Very, very true. Same Beis Yaakov upbringing. So I think it's a non-answer when Mashiach comes, because I also don't think anybody's doing anything. I don't think half the Jews I know would want Mashiach if he decided to come tomorrow, so when Mashiach comes, it's a cop-out.
Like when he comes, are the Jews going to actually want to pick up and go then, right?
No, they're not, is the answer.
You have to want it, I guess, now, right?
Right. I mean, listen, if everybody here could live in the King David and have hotel breakfasts every day, then, that would be great. I think that's how a lot of people see Israel. A lot of people see what I call the birthright tour version of Israel, or the Sukkot vacation part of Israel. And that's just, they'll come here and they'll be like, I know where to go, and then they'll take you to Cafe Ramon and you're like, seriously, this is
amazing. Right. So Jordana, let's get a reel over here, because you're a really strong woman and you're just, you can handle a lot. But I want to know what were the harder parts of it? Were there moments of loneliness and homesickness and maybe the culture clash of Israelis? It's a different world out there. So
totally different.
Some of the harder moments for you and what people should expect when making this plunge.
Okay. So I always say that one of the luckiest parts of my Aliyah was that I made Aliyah from New York. Being a New Yorker and being an Israeli are very similar. And that's why when I think of you, my sweet Torontonian, or someone from the Midwest, or, someone with a Southern sensibility, I think it might be a little bit more overwhelming for them, because it is a very upfront culture. It is a very, brusque culture. And I don't get offended that easily. So it hasn't really affected me. But it definitely brings people down. Things take a lot longer here. Like errands take a lot longer. For example, in America, if you had to go to the bank, you would go block out 15 minutes and do your banking. And in Israel, it's at least an hour-long process. The post office is an hour-long process. Things don't find their way in the mail here. I haven't gotten a regular invitation, like paper invitation, in years, because we just use Evites, because that's the only way it would work. That's the only way we'd get the information. So these are, minor inconveniences that to someone who is used to every convenience kind of throws them for a loop. Also Hebrew. And I don't want to say if you don't have a perfect Hebrew, you can't move here, because I do not have a perfect Hebrew. If you don't have a perfect Hebrew and you want to live in Israel, move to a community with a lot of English speakers. And even if you want to live on a kibbutz and experience the real Israel, you're making life very difficult for yourself. It's not a good move. There are plenty of communities with lots and lots of Anglos. They're a little bit more expensive, but your kids will have people to talk to. You'll have people to talk to. Everybody in your shul you'll be able to talk to. So
you're all in the same place.
What I always say is that, I'm going to live this very English speaking existence. And then Bezrat Hashem, my kids will, what I always say is translate my bills for me. You know what I mean? They'll tell me, what this says, what this means. There's a sign on the door of my apartment building. It could say, dead animals in the backyard, and I would have no idea, because I've never even thought to read it. It's so many words.
That's amazing. I remember simple things like going to pay the Arnona bills, like the taxes on the apartments.
Yes.
And I just remember coming home in tears,
yes,
bring the right paper. There were those, we call it Yisurin, right? Yisurin is small hardships, challenges.
Right.
We say that you can't get Israel without those hardships. It's part of the price. It's the price you pay. It's worth it, clearly. You live in Israel, but it comes with the challenges.
100%. But there are, even the Israel that we lived in whatever it was, 2007, 2008, is not the Israel that exists now. I mean, there's an app for everything. Everything is online. Everything, you know what I mean? We have 1,000,001 apps for every possibility. Like, you know what I mean? So life here is extremely, and, you know, now you can see that Israel really has their, you know, their stuff together when it comes to healthcare. We're all about to be vaccinated in about a month and a half. And, you know, it's, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I get to live in the country that will be the first vaccinated country in the world. Incredible. That's crazy.
It's incredible.
What a bracha. Yeah. So,
yeah,
you know, there's a lot of minor inconveniences that if you see them as minor inconveniences and not the end of the world, aren't that bad.
Right. Your perspective is everything.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And I always say that one of the worst things that you can do is expect to move your life from America to Israel. Because unless you have a lot of money, your life will be different. In some ways, you're going to have a smaller apartment. You're going to maybe live in an apartment and not a house. You're going to, you know, you're not going to be around your family all the time. So things are different here.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't think of it as something that like, I'm so lucky and I get to like, you know, for 2,000 years, we all, 2,000 years, we all, you know, davened toward Yerushalayim. We all said, Yerushalayim. We say, you know, things about living in Israel, like hundreds of times a day, you know, in davening. And then people are like, my ultimate goal is to live in the 5 towns. Like, what? What are you saying? Like,
one of my friends that lives in Jerusalem, her name is Chaya Lester. Have you ever heard of Chaya Lester? Kaplan Lester?
No.
She lives in Nachlaot.
So then I have the idea.
You get it. Like what? So Chaya, I was sitting with her, we were on a bus and there was a massive traffic jam, which is so Israel, right? You're like, just getting from one place to the next is just like, it's a headache. You come out, you're stressed. You feel like you need to say a blessing that you're still alive. Like the driving in Israel is pretty insane. And she said, she just gave such great perspective to it. She said, my soul has been waiting for 2,000 years to sit in this traffic jam. And you know, I've been to Israel so many times since she said that. And every time I'm sitting in a traffic jam or waiting in line for my coffee or whatever it is, there's lines everywhere. Thank God there's so many people. It's so alive. I just think like, yes, this is exactly where I need to be right now. Like even when it's annoying, but this is like the purpose of who we are. This is like, let's just be here. This is a miracle.
You know, it's so funny because people have been talking about how, you know, since Corona and for the, you know, Israel specifically, kind of shut its borders to anyone who is an Israeli about 10 months ago, I think, like I think in April. So anyone who was, you know, it's a weird thing to be in the country with no, you know, visitors, no birthwriters, you know, it's like such a weird experience because we're so used to, you know, the hospitality culture, you know, and someone was saying that Americans or Jews, you know, diasporic Jews for the first time are seeing what it's like when going to Israel is not an option, you know? And that's like for the first time in their lifetimes when they can't come to Israel. So it's
so true. It was a big I know that Aliyah is definitely on the rise now with Corona and with that, just in general, like people are waking up. I think people are, many of my very close friends have been making Aliyah over the last couple of years. It's interesting that the last 2 jobs, like the job that we're in right now, which is Rabbi and Rabisa of the Sephardic community here in Portland. So we stepped in after Rabbi Kaplan and Mira made Aliyah. And then and now we're going to be moving this summer, hopefully to Chicago, to Deerfield, Illinois, where once again, we're stepping in for this incredible family, David and Ali Began, to make their dream come true and make Aliyah. I'm like,
and then
when is it going to be our check?
No, that's it. Whoever takes over for you is going to say, and we're taking over for Gadi and Eve Levy, who made Aliyah, finally.
I mean, I do think it's going to be quite a few years. We have to pull our kids through the school system at this point. So we have another decade. If anyone's listening from Deerfield and I'm like, no, they want to leave. No, we got another decade with you ladies and men. But yeah, I'll tell you, when I need a good cry, I search for videos of people making Aliyah. Literally, the Nefesh B'Nefesh videos out there. Like I've watched Jamie Geller making Aliyah. I cry my heart out. You know, like sometimes you just need a good cry. Like your soul just needs to like release like pain or
Totally.
So that's what gets me going. I watch and I read stories of families that are taking this plunge, making their dream come true. And the hardships and the struggles and the triumphs and overcoming and really keeping things in perspective. There's sacrifice involved when it's such a significant thing that you're going for. There's going to be toil. It's not going to be simple, but you would never give it up for anything. Like I look at you, there's been hardships, right? Jordana has been smooth. But like you're such a light, like you're living your mission and you're sharing that mission with people. And I'm just so impressed with you. And I give you a bracha that you should always have koach and strength to continue this holy work because it's big stuff.
Well, I want to demystify, I want to make it seem more attainable because I think one of the issues that Aliyah has is that people think that it's this like unattainable goal. And it's not, it's an attainable goal and it's something that you need to work for, but we work for things all the time and it's very, very doable. So I think, I once had when I was involved in Kiruv, one of the Kiruv rabbis said this really great thing. And he said, what is the opposite of pleasure? Do you know?
So we would probably say pain.
Right. So most people think pain. And he said,
I think, is it comfort?
It's comfort. Exactly. Yeah. Right. So the opposite of pleasure is not pain because, something painful might be pleasurable to someone. Mm-hmm. But it's comfort, and comfort is just stagnation, It's this homeostasis of everything's fine and everything's good. And I'm headed down the assembly line like I was meant to be.
Try not to just go around the lampposts, just keep going and
hitting all your targets, And I think at the end of the day, it's one of the most pleasurable things that I've ever done, even though it was difficult and it was a struggle sometimes. And I don't want people to think that it's not doable and that I'm some I'd like them to think I'm a light. That's really wonderful. But to think that I'm doing something that, is unattainable is not true. I'm doing something that truly anyone can do. I think that at some point in their life, everyone can do it. I don't know that if you have a second grader and a fifth grader, I don't know that that's the perfect time to do it. But I do think that there is a time in someone's life to do it. And I think that it should be a goal. It should be an aspiration.
I love how you put it in the beginning. At least you should want it, even if it's attainable for now. But that desire, like waking up that heart, that yearning.
Yeah, seeing your friends in Israel and being like, oh, I'd love to be there. I'd love to do that. I'd love that to be my life. People have elderly parents and people have sick children. And there's a plethora of reasons why someone can't do it right then, but it should always be an aspiration because there's nothing that Israel doesn't have that you need, that Israel doesn't have. You know what I mean? There's a lot of things that Israel doesn't have that you want a lot, but nothing that you need.
Right. It's so true.
So
true.
I always tell people the only things that don't get easier is missing your family. It's the only thing. Everything else gets easier. I don't miss anything.
Yeah. I remember when I was leaving Israel at that goodbye party where I was just crying and crying and crying. I remember thinking, if I could just stay in Israel and just be a simple Jerusalem woman, just raising my family in Israel, that would be enough. It's interesting. We went on and we're doing incredible things in the Jewish world and we're bringing people closer to God. And, I feel like we know that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. But I remember distinctly that feeling of, I would give all of that up, all of the big things that we're about to do with our life. it's so equal in my books to being a simple Jerusalem lady, like just living.
But you don't have to be a simple Jerusalem lady. You can be an impressive Jerusalem lady.
It's true, but I'm saying just like my sister-in-laws, I have a lot of brothers and sisters that live in Israel. And sometimes they're feeling down. They're like, what are we doing here? And I'm like, are you for real? You guys are living in Israel. Like that is in of itself is huge. Like that's enough. Like we're like spinning our wheels over here trying to do things for the Jewish world, but like you live in Israel. Like that is like, guys, see it. It's incredible. But sometimes the people in Israel need to be told that. Or
100%. Secular Tel Avivian, when I'm walking around Tel Aviv, or if I go on a date with someone from Tel Aviv and they say, where are you from? And I say New York, they get personally angry that I had the audacity to leave New York, that I had the audacity to have 2 working passports and utilizing the wrong one. Absolutely. They think that I'm the craziest person in the world. I think that Israel needs to teach a Tzionut, a Zionist course in every single class that they have. Personally, I've thought of this like many times. I wish the Israelis had the love of Israel that I had as an American.
Maybe that's one of the reasons that you're there. Just one person.
100%.
One person at a time. Just keep at it. Wow, this was so much fun. This was so incredible. I don't know if there's anything else to leave us with. I want to make sure that whoever's listening, if they want to find you, I know that you're out there. You have a blog, Jordan Tel Aviv. I love that name. And she also has a podcast called Yalla, Aliyah, which is what we're talking about today. And how else can we find you?
I am at Jordana_Brown on Instagram. So people can ask me questions there. I'm also like affiliated with Peas in the Holy Land, which is Peas Loving Carrots Israel page, but it's not so active. So if you're interested, you can find me there.
Is that recipe?
And then, no, it's like Danielle, who is my friend, Peas Loving Carrots. She started this like Instagram dedicated to Israel and motivating people to move, which started off with a bang, but then, it was hard for us all to maintain, but it still exists. So you can try and follow us there. And then you can say, hey, Jordana, what's up?
What's your most active platform right now? Like
I would say,
I want to follow you.
I would say Instagram, only because I don't accept like friend requests from people that I'm not friends with on Facebook. But Instagram at Jordana_Brown.
Okay, great.
Lots of pictures of Israel, so you can't miss it. Yeah. And my blog is great. Unfortunately, I'm not so on top of that either. My blog was started to kind of track my Aliyah, and my Aliyah, thank God, was many years ago. So, it's in the beginning, everything is new and interesting and exciting. And then at a certain point, it's, it's the same. And definitely since COVID hit, it's been, a bit even keeled. Yeah. So.
Okay, well, soon we're going to turn that corner, and we can't wait to come see you in person.
Amen. I can't wait.
Yeah, I think you're right. When they closed the borders of Israel, that was like, it was a wake up. It was, that's when you really, listen, I'm from Canada. So they closed the borders of Canada. I felt, I hope they're safe. What if they need me? There was all that guilt and fear attached. But when they closed the borders of Israel, it woke something else up in me. Like, even if I wanted, even with all the money in the world, I cannot get into the Holy Land of Israel.
Well, there is one way, as you know, right? Dying. People who made Aliyah.
Or dying, right? There were.
Oh, I wasn't going to say that. I was going to say, if you made Aliyah, I was on a flight with this older couple who made Aliyah because they had planned to in the future, because their kids lived there. Then they moved up their Aliyah because they couldn't see their kids for however long. And so they made Aliyah earlier.
Wow.
Wild, right?
Yeah. Wow. Okay, well, we should all make it back there soon. And
Amen.
I want to thank you, Jordana, for
thank you for having me.
And being such a light and sharing with us today. Thank you so, so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Take care. Thanks, everybody, for joining.
Bye.